Okay, quick question for you. What exactly does a massive 40-ounce stainless steel tumbler have in common with a big-toothed furry monster doll called a Lababoo? I mean, at first glance, they exist in completely different universes, right? One's a heavy-duty hydration tool, and the other is this trendy little vinyl collectible. But what actually connects them? Well, it's a massive cultural wave of viral hype. The kind of hype that has people literally storming retail stores, getting into fights in the aisles, and hoarding multiples of items they honestly don't even need. Welcome to our explainer. Today we're unpacking the hidden realities behind these massive trending products. Because what you're seeing on TikTok or Instagram, the perfectly aesthetic collections, those massive unboxing hauls, that is literally just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface of these viral social media trends are massive and often completely ignored underlying costs. So we're going to look at the real-world impact of all this hype, ranging from some very urgent public health concerns and staggering environmental footprints, all the way down to the deeply manipulative psychology that's actually driving our spending habits. Here is our roadmap for the deep dive today. 1. Viral trends and mass hype. 2. The Stanley Cup lead scare. 3. Environmental costs of viral toys. 4. Blind boxes and gamification. 5. The overconsumption trap. And 6. Rethinking our consumption habits. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Viral Trends and Mass Hype. Let's just look at the visible, physical chaos these products are causing out in the real world. If you've been anywhere near the news lately, you've definitely seen the videos. People literally sprinting towards seasonal displays at Target just to grab a limited edition Valentine's Day Stanley Cup. Or literally getting into physical altercations over Labubu blind box toys. It's wild. These items have completely transcended their basic utility and morphed into these highly coveted middle-class status symbols. And driven heavily by social media hauls, consumers are suddenly hoarding entire collections of these $45 cups or really extensive dolls, just desperately trying to match them to every single outfit or secure the rarest colors. It is a frantic scramble for social currency. Which brings us to Section 2, the Stanley Cup lead scare. Looking just a bit below the surface of all that hype, a very serious alarm was sounded recently regarding a major public health concern: lead. Now, to understand why the internet completely lost its mind over this, we have to understand what lead actually does to the human body. As Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health expert Ronnie Levang points out, lead is not just some mild irritant. It is an all-systems toxin. That means there is practically no system in your body, we're talking your nervous system, your immune system, your reproductive system, that isn't harmed by it. And it is especially devastating to children because it can permanently impact their intelligence and behavior. So yeah, this is the very real public health context that made the internet explode when people started using home lead testing kits on their viral tumblers. But let's properly frame the actual risk here. On one hand, environmental toxicologist Kimberly Garrett notes that using a lead pellet to seal vacuum insulation is, believe it or not, an industry standard. That lead is entirely sealed beneath a stainless steel barrier at the bottom of the cup. So, as long as that structural integrity holds up, there's no lead on the surface you're touching or drinking from. The danger really only kicks in if that bottom barrier falls off, which the company insists is rare under normal use. But on the other hand, public health expert Neil Manyar provides some vital context for us. While we absolutely should be vigilant about our cups, the far more pervasive everyday risks for lead poisoning actually come from older home pipes, chipping paint, and even certain cosmetics and vintage toys. So it's really about keeping perspective on where our greatest public health hazards truly lie. Moving on to Section 3, Environmental Costs of Viral Toys. Shifting our focus from personal health to planetary health for a second, the grand irony of the whole reusable water bottle trend is that it was originally supposed to replace single-use plastics. But, as sustainability researcher Jacqueline Selmont points out, mass collecting them creates a completely new, massive crisis. I mean, producing these heavy-duty cups requires incredibly destructive iron mining. Then, that iron has to be smelted into steel, which is a super high-energy process that generates massive CO2 emissions. And because our society largely operates in a linear economy, when people inevitably move on to the next trendy cup, these virtually indestructible steel vessels get dumped straight into landfills. Buying 30 to 50 reusable steel cups completely defeats their environmental purpose. You really only need one or two to actually be sustainable. And this dynamic perfectly illustrates the wider toy industry's impact as well. The data comparing the global warming potential of different toys is just undeniable. Fossil fuel-based PVC plastic toys, like so many of the viral collectibles sold today, produce significantly higher greenhouse gas emissions across literally every single phase of manufacturing, use, and disposal when you compare them to sustainable, traditionally made wooden alternatives like Chanapatna toys. So when consumers mass purchase these pasta collectibles, they're actively funding a deeply carbon-intensive manufacturing cycle that ultimately ends up polluting our oceans and landfills. Let's go a bit deeper. Section 4. Blind boxes and gamification. Going further down the iceberg, we hit the classic blind box. You aren't just buying a toy here. You're buying a randomized chance to get the toy you actually want. Experts call this phenomenon the gamification of retail. Consumers don't know exactly what reward they're going to get until they finalize the purchase and physically open the box. It structurally mimics gambling. You voluntarily invest your money into this randomized process, just hoping to hit that rare, highly valuable item. And this psychological hook is exactly what drives people to make repeat purchases, desperately chasing that one rare figure to complete their collection. This whole gamification tactic has become so severe that regulators are actually stepping in. Over in Shanghai, authorities released very specific compliance guidelines specifically to minimize consumer harm. They capped the price of a single blind box at 200 RMB to prevent massive single transaction losses. They now require prominent probability disclosures so buyers actually know their odds. And perhaps most fascinatingly, they suggested mandatory pity timers. This means if a consumer buys a certain number of boxes, they are eventually guaranteed to get the rare item, strictly capping how much money they can lose. Finally, they put in strict age limits, recognizing that this is, at its core, essentially a gambling-like product being aggressively marketed to kids under 8. Next up, Section 5, the overconsumption trap. So, what is the underlying cultural phenomenon driving all of this behavior? The psychology behind what we buy en masse is fascinating. Often, we see these intense consumerism trends spike when the world or our environment just feels completely out of control. Influencers on platforms like TikTok convince us that acquiring a perfectly color-coordinated collection of redundant gadgets is somehow going to bring us aesthetic happiness and a sense of order. People end up buying extra products just because they look slightly more aesthetic than the perfectly functional ones they already have sitting in their cupboards. I want to pause for a second and just reflect on this incredibly powerful quote from author Aja Barber in Paste magazine. She asks, who gets to enjoy things on a burning planet where consumerism is definitely a problem? It really forces us to stop and question the privilege and the ethics behind our habits, doesn't it? Standing in a massive line to collect unrecyclable status symbols, whether they're steel cups or vinyl toys, has a very real negative impact on the world. It's a luxury of privilege that just ignores the massive global trash heap we are actively creating. Which leads us to our final stop, Section 6, rethinking our consumption habits. So how do we actually fix this? Well, shifting the culture has to start with us as consumers. First, we really need to embrace the growing trend of de-influencing. This is where creators actively call out brands and manipulative marketing, urging audiences to critically evaluate if they actually need a product in the first place. Second, we have to vote with our wallets. We need to choose companies that are actively transitioning to tree-based, recycled packaging and sustainable materials, pushing the whole industry toward a circular economy. And finally, we absolutely have to stop treating durable goods like a heavy-duty steel water bottle designed to outlive us as disposable, seasonal fashion accessories. Which brings us to our final thought. The internet is inevitably going to generate another massive craze, right? There will always be a new must-have cup or some highly sought-after collectible. But the next time a product goes completely viral, I want you to ask yourself, will you blindly buy into the hype, or will you stop and see the hidden health, environmental, and psychological costs lurking beneath the surface? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I challenge you to make your next purchase a mindful one. See you next time.